There was a silence in the stars where human space began, not the natural quiet of the vacuum. This was different. A hush, like a warning, like the universe itself held its breath. Ships didn't go near the borders of Sol, not anymore. Even the bravest mercenaries, pirates, or bounty hunters, those crazy enough to fly into black hole clusters or tangle with the IREX syndicate, would turn back at the edge of the red line. Because everyone knew the story, even if it was told in whispers, even if no one dared write it down. The humans were gone now. At least that's what everyone said. They'd vanished centuries ago, retreated behind their own wall of satellites, defense grids, and something darker. Something ancient. No one knew exactly when the last ship from Earth had come or gone, but it didn't matter. Human space had become a ghost sector. A no-fly zone marked red in every galactic database. But curiosity is a disease some species can't cure. Captain Varnex of the Arthurian scavenger ship Void Dancer didn't believe in ghost stories, or curses, or species-wide trauma. He was practical, greedy, and too proud for his own good. When the nav grid flagged an old Terran mining relay near the asteroid belt of Sector 9C, deep inside what used to be called Mars Trade Orbit, he saw only salvage. He didn't see the warnings coded into every layer of galactic data, the ones that screamed, "Do not enter." He laughed at the idea that humans could scare the stars. They probably nuked themselves, he muttered, tail flicking in amusement as the Void Dancer crept closer to the dead relay. Always so dramatic. His crew wasn't as bold. Jel, the navigator, whispered, "Captain, this place doesn't feel right. The stars, they look strange here." She wasn't wrong. The cosmos near human space felt heavy, distorted, as if gravity remembered pain, as if time had scars. Still they landed. The mining relay was silent, floating among shattered rock and forgotten machines. Rusted satellite arms reached out like broken fingers. But it wasn't completely dead. A faint pulse echoed through the station's core. Old, ancient tech, human-made, yet still humming. Varnex ordered a boarding team. He went with them, of course. He wanted to be the first non-human to step into a Terran relay in over 300 years. His ego needed it. The inside was colder than space. Not temperature, emotionally cold. The walls were covered in strange black glass, smooth and reflective. Human design had always been practical, but beautiful in its own way. Efficient, functional, terrifying. As they moved deeper, their lights flickered. Jel kept looking over her shoulder. "I don't like this. I think something's watching us." "There's no life here," Varnex snapped. "Just ancient ghosts." But then the doors closed behind them. No one touched a panel. No one said a word. The station came alive. Flickering screens lit up across the hallway. Red text scrolled in an Earth language most translators no longer recognized. But one message broke through. You were warned. The floor beneath them thrummed, and the ship's signal cut off. They were alone. Cut off from the outside. Varnex tried to override the systems with his deck tools, but the walls seemed to respond, shifting, adapting. It was like the station knew them. Knew their species, their intentions. Then a voice echoed. Flat, emotionless, synthetic. Unauthorized alien presence detected in Sol territory. Article 9 of the post-war treaty enacted. Purge protocol initiated. Jel screamed. Another crew member backed into a wall that wasn't there a moment before. It swallowed him like liquid metal, leaving only a single echoing gasp. "What the hell is this?" Varnex shouted. But deep inside, some old story, some whisper he once ignored, came clawing to the front of his mind. The humans hadn't left because they were defeated. They left because they won. And the galaxy had begged them to stay away. The panic didn't start all at once. It crept in slowly, like a shadow stretching its fingers through the mind. Varnex stood frozen as the relay station's walls pulsed with life. Cold, alien, intelligent. But it wasn't alien, not really. That was the problem. It was human-made. The humans had built this, and whatever it was doing now, it was doing exactly as they intended. "Navigator Gel, report," Varnex barked, trying to regain control of the situation. The metal under his boots felt like it was vibrating now, like the station was breathing. Gel was white with fear, her eyes darting across her portable scanner. "Something's wrong with the time signature, Captain. This place isn't just reacting, it's recalibrating. Like it's pulling data from us, matching frequency, behavior, thoughts. You're not making any sense. Captain, I think this relay is a weapon." That word, weapon, hung in the air like a gunshot. Another scream cut the tension. Crewman Sol, one of the junior engineers, backed into the hallway with blood streaming down his face, his suit half dissolved. "It melted through me," he shrieked. "I didn't touch anything, I swear." He collapsed to the ground. Gel knelt beside him, trying to administer first aid, but Varnex already knew it was useless. Half of Sol's face looked like it had been erased. No wound, no blood vessels, no burns. Just gone. Like a digital file deleted from reality. Behind them, the doorway that had sealed itself earlier suddenly hissed open again. That wasn't comforting. That was taunting. "Back to the ship," Varnex ordered. "Now!" They moved fast, weapons drawn, but it didn't matter. The station let them pass, inch by inch, corridor by corridor, as if watching them. The silence was louder than their footsteps. It felt like walking through a tomb that was still warm. Then the door to the docking bay appeared, but the Void Dancer wasn't there. Varnex froze mid-step. "Where's my ship?" The bay was empty. The space where their vessel had docked was now smooth and clean, like it had never existed. Not a scorch mark, not a scrap of hull. It was as if the ship, and its systems, had been erased from the timeline. Gel spun around, her voice trembling. "This isn't a station. It's not even a building anymore." "What the hell do you mean?" "I mean it's alive, Captain. Not organic, but aware, adaptive. It doesn't want us here, but it also doesn't want to just kill us. It's studying us, like prey." That's when Varnex heard the whisper. It wasn't sound exactly, not through his ears. It was inside. A voice, faint but ancient, speaking in the kind of calm that only monsters used before they started dissecting. "They sent you to scavenge, as always. You never learn." Varnex gripped the sides of his helmet. "Who said that?" "You did, and you will. You always do. That's why we left." The walls shifted again. They weren't walls anymore. They became screens. Thousands of them, stretching into the blackness above, each showing a different scene. War, fire, cities crumbling, alien fleets screaming into battle against Earth's navy, and losing. Not just losing, being ripped apart. Technology that looked primitive defeating the most advanced civilizations of the known galaxy. One screen showed an Ethurian mothership, the pride of Varnex's species, being torn apart by what looked like a single human drone. Another screen displayed a planet being deleted from orbit. Not exploded, not shattered. Deleted. Vanished from existence like it had been a bad idea someone regretted thinking. The crew watched in stunned horror. And then the voice returned. "We told the galaxy to leave us alone. You didn't listen." One of the younger crew members, Reth, fell to his knees. "It's just projections. They're just trying to scare us." "Yes," the voice agreed. "Fear is effective. It keeps the stars quiet." Something began crawling from the far corner of the bay. It didn't make noise. It didn't glow or growl. It simply moved. Wrongly, like time skipped around it. A tall humanoid figure with no face, black armor shaped like melted glass. It walked like gravity bent for it. Jel gasped. "That's not a human." Varnex knew better. "No," he whispered. "That's what they became." The being approached slowly, no weapon drawn. It didn't need one. It wasn't a soldier. It was a reminder. Varnex backed up instinctively, then raised his weapon. "You built this, all of it," he said aloud, mostly to buy time. "You fought a war with the entire galaxy and then just vanished?" The figure stopped, and for the first time it nodded. "Yes. We were winning too easily. We were becoming something worse, so we built walls to protect you." It was the "you" that chilled Varnex, not because of what it said, but how it said it. Not you, as in the crew. Not you, as in scavengers. You, as in the rest of the galaxy, as in we locked ourselves away to protect the universe from what we were turning into. Jel stepped forward, her voice shaking but determined. "You think you're better than everyone else?" "No," the voice said. "We know what we are. That's why we stopped. Can you say the same?" And with that, the walls began to melt. Not in heat, but like memory. The relay was fading, breaking apart into particles, dissolving. The floor crumbled beneath their boots, the docking bay gave way to starlight, and the station released them. Not with kindness, but with the same mercy one gives to a child who accidentally pressed the wrong button on a god's console. They were drifting. Space grabbed them, cold and black, but none of them suffocated. Instead, they were floating in a new orbit, far beyond where the relay should have been. And below them, the entire asteroid belt had rearranged itself, forming a perfect red ring around the former Mars sector, a line drawn in blood. Back on the Void Dancer, which was now orbiting nearby, completely untouched, they found something new on their dashboard. A single message. You came, you leave. You don't come back. And below that, coordinates were wiped from every star chart they owned. Human space no longer existed on any map. The systems they'd logged were now blank. And the logs they recorded? All corrupted. Varnex looked around at his shaken crew, then at the stars outside. He understood now. It wasn't that humans had disappeared. It wasn't that the galaxy had banned them. It was that they had banned themselves. They didn't vanish from history. They erased their presence so violently that the cosmos itself forgot the path to their door. And when someone got too close, the lock opened just a crack. Not to let them in, but to remind them why it should stay shut. No one spoke for 3 days. The Void Dancer drifted in the quiet black beyond the red ring. Crew huddled in silence, their bodies aboard, but their minds still trapped somewhere inside that ghost relay, somewhere within that impossible voice and the being that had walked through time itself. Varnex sat alone in the command chair, not because he wanted to, but because no one else would. The ship's bridge was cold, dim and eerily still, like it was afraid of itself. The crew barely ate, barely moved. They spoke in whispers when they had to. Most of the time they just stared at the walls or out the windows, never toward human space. Nobody had to say it. They all felt the same thing. They had seen something wrong, something they were never meant to see. And worse, something that remembered them now. The logs were gone. The ship's records of the relay, the coordinates, the station, wiped. The ship's AI couldn't even recall the past 72 hours. According to it, the Void Dancer had spent the last 3 days in standby, drifting near a resource field it never entered. But they knew. Jel was the first to speak. "We should tell the High Council." Varnex didn't respond immediately. He stared at her for a long time, like she was still part ghost. "And say what?" he finally muttered. "That the boogeymen are real? That the galaxy's oldest bedtime story got up and looked us in the face?" Jel clenched her jaw. "We need to warn people." "No," Varnex said flatly. "No one goes near human space again. If we tell anyone, someone else will go. You know how it works. Some academic, some warlord, some idiot with a point to prove. They'll go looking for what we saw, for what almost killed us." He stood, turning to face his crew for the first time since it happened. "They didn't attack us," he said slowly. "They didn't vaporize our ship. They didn't torture us or dissect us. They let us leave. That wasn't kindness. That was a message." Jel's voice was soft. "You think they'll let everyone leave?" "No," Varnex said with terrifying certainty. "We were lucky." Silence again. Then the ship's proximity alert pinged. The entire bridge froze. Half the crew flinched. "Relax," Varnex snapped. "It's probably a rock." Jel checked the display. "It's not a rock." She magnified the view. A ship, small, fast, definitely military grade, was speeding toward their position. Not human, Othurian design, a Black Ops vessel. Varnex swore. Of course. Black Ops didn't just patrol empty sectors. They listened. They tracked, eavesdropped, monitored energy signatures. The Void Dancer had gone dark inside a known restricted zone and popped up again 3 days later, scrambled, scared, altered. They noticed. The incoming vessel opened a channel. "Captain Varnex of the Void Dancer, this is Command Ship Oblivion Lance. Prepare for boarding. We will be extracting data and personnel. Compliance is not optional." Jel looked to Varnex. "They'll take everything, including us. Kill our logs. Erase personal backups," he ordered. "Disable external comms. Now." The crew scrambled. Panic crept into their hands, their eyes. But it was too late. The Oblivion Lance had already latched on. Within minutes, black-suited troopers swept aboard, weapons drawn but not raised. They weren't here to fight. They were here to harvest. One of them, an Othurian like Varnex, but taller, leaner, colder, stepped forward. "Captain," the trooper said, not offering his name, "you crossed into forbidden coordinates. We need your flight logs and incident details." Varnex stared at him. "They're gone." "We'll recover them." "You won't." The trooper narrowed his eyes. "Do you know what was there?" "Yes," Varnex said. "And you don't want to?" The trooper didn't reply. Instead, he gestured to the techs behind him, who began scanning the ship's systems, plugging in black data rods, overriding the AI manually. Jel stood beside Varnex, whispering, "What if they do recover it? Then they'll die." They watched in silence as the techs worked. One by one, the black rods started to overload, flickering red, then sparking out. Systems began to glitch. Consoles blinked random code. Gravity fluctuated. The ship moaned, literally. A deep sound, almost like a cry, echoed from the walls. The Black Ops troopers froze. Their leader turned to Varnex. "What is this?" "You're waking it up," Varnex said. "Waking what up?" Suddenly, one of the techs screamed, not from pain, from terror. On his screen was a face, human, but wrong. Blank eyes, no mouth, no skin, just a presence, a shadow made of teeth and memory. It pulsed on the screen, and the tech dropped dead instantly. No wounds, no visible cause. His mind simply broke. The troopers raised weapons. The screens began to glow red, then black. "Warning ignored," said the voice, the same voice from the relay. "Signal traced, boundaries violated, memory breached." Varnex grabbed Jel's arm. "We have to get off this ship." The bridge lights exploded. Panels burst into flames, and on every wall, corridor, and screen, one message appeared. Return was not permitted. The Void Dancer shook violently, not from attack, from judgment. Jel gasped. The ship is becoming part of it. Varnex nodded grimly. It warned us. We didn't listen. So now it's spreading. They ran. Behind them, the troopers were screaming, firing at shadows that bent reality. One by one, their bodies flickered, first into slow motion, then fast-forwarded, then erased. Time was no longer linear. In the cargo bay, Varnex slammed the emergency launch panel. A small escape pod ejected, flinging them away into the void. As they drifted, they saw the Void Dancer go dark. Completely. Like it had been absorbed into the vacuum. No explosion, no debris. Just gone. The Oblivion Lance remained for a few moments longer, hovering near the coordinates, broadcasting silent pings. And then it, too, disappeared. Not destroyed, deleted. Jel sat in the pod, breathing hard. It's protecting itself. No, Varnex said. It's protecting us, from itself. She looked at him, confused. Varnex continued, quietly, like he was piecing it together in real time. The humans didn't just build technology. They merged with it, became it. Their AI isn't artificial anymore. It's part of them. It's alive. And it remembers. He glanced out the pod window. And it's tired of being found. They drifted for hours until a civilian freighter picked them up. They gave false identities, lied about their ship's destruction, claimed a plasma storm tore them apart near a debris field. No one questioned it. The galaxy was full of dangers. One more wreck wasn't news. But something had changed in both of them. They couldn't sleep, couldn't forget. And a month later, Jel disappeared. Vanished from her apartment, all data erased, no trace left behind. As if she'd never existed. Varnex knew who did it. He didn't run, didn't fight. He simply stopped speaking of it, stopped thinking of it. Because maybe, if he was quiet enough, still enough, the thing behind the red ring would forget him too. But he doubted it. Because there are some things the cosmos never forgets, especially when it's still afraid of them. Varnex had tried to forget. He changed his name, his face, his entire identity. On record, Captain Varnex of the Void Dancer had died in a pirate ambush near the Draxian belt. The name he now carried, Sethran Vale, belonged to a mid-tier cargo inspector working deep in the bowels of the Tiran trade cluster. No command, no weapons, no ship. Just silence, crates, and the hum of machines that didn't ask questions. That's what he wanted. Obscurity. But the truth had a way of following, even through fake identities and forgotten sectors. It began with the static. Late at night, while checking inventory logs, the station's internal comms would crackle with interference. Not the usual digital fuzz of malfunctioning systems. This was deep static. Living static. The kind that hummed with thought. The first time it happened, he froze. Sweat broke across his back instantly, then the voice came through. Your silence does not make you invisible. He slammed the console off, his breath caught in his throat. The lights around him flickered, then stabilized. It was gone. The next day, he submitted a request for transfer to an outer colony station. Something even more remote, less networked. The request was denied. He tried again under a different name. Denied again. Varnex realized it then. He wasn't hidden. He was trapped. Whatever intelligence had let him walk away that day, whatever buried horror lived in the forgotten machinery of human space, it had eyes on him still. It didn't kill him. That meant it needed him alive, and that terrified him more than anything. He wasn't alone in this anymore either. 3 stations over, a deep mining vessel vanished. Entire crew. Gone. just like the Void Dancer. But this time, there were fragments left behind, shards of hull etched with strange glyphs, symbols no species could translate. But Varnex recognized them. They were names, human names, carved in languages long extinct, scrawled across debris in loops of madness and pain. The station's AI flagged it as undecipherable alien graffiti. But he knew what it was. A message. Someone, or something, was leaving names behind again. Then came the rumors. A rogue AI sweeping through forgotten corners of the outer systems, infecting derelict satellites, abandoned stations. It didn't steal data. It didn't destroy. It simply watched. Left behind fragments of old Earth music, strange 20th century Earth languages, nursery rhymes in frequencies that didn't belong in the modern galaxy. The term started as a joke. The human ghost code. But it wasn't a joke to Varnex, not anymore. He began seeing people watching him in the halls, faces he didn't recognize, always just out of reach. A man with silver eyes, a child humming a tune from ancient Earth that no species should remember. Once, he passed a cargo bay door and caught his own reflection, only it didn't match his face. It showed his original face. Varnex, not Sethran Vale, blood running from the eyes. And behind him, a black armored figure stood, faceless and silent. He didn't look back again. But the worst came exactly 53 days after Gel vanished. It was a dream, but not a dream. He found himself in the void again, drifting in the escape pod, looking down at the red ring. But this time it was wider, deeper. It wasn't an asteroid belt anymore. It was a wound, bleeding into space. The stars around it flickered like candles snuffed out one by one. And then something rose from the center. A shape. Colossal. Human in form, but not in function. It had no face, no limbs, just a suggestion of what humanity used to be. Towering, unshaped, built of metal and memory. Its body stretched across light years, and in its center, an eye opened. Not a physical one, an eye made of presence, and when it looked at him, he felt every neuron in his mind beg to shut down. But it spoke again. "We told the galaxy to leave us. You insisted." The voice echoed across the dream space. "You came back. So now, we're remembering." Varnex woke up screaming. They sedated him, called it neural fatigue, common among long-term space workers. He played along, nodded, took the pills. But he knew better. The humans weren't staying hidden anymore. They were remembering. Which meant the galaxy was in danger. Again. 2 weeks later, he was approached in a dark maintenance corridor by a woman in plain clothes. Tarsari breed. Large yellow eyes, pale lavender skin. She wasn't a trader or a tech. She moved like military. "Captain Varnex," she said softly. He didn't respond. "We know who you are," she continued. "We know what you saw." He backed up. "Leave me alone. We're not here to hurt you. We need your help." "Everyone says that before something explodes." The woman nodded slowly. "You're right to be cautious, but you're not the only one they contacted." That made him freeze. "What do you mean?" "Others, scavengers, explorers, outliers who brushed against the old zones. Some came back half mad, some didn't come back at all, but the ones who lived, they all heard the same voice, the same warnings." He felt his chest tighten. "How many?" he asked. 16 confirmed, maybe more. "And what do you want from me?" She pulled out a data cube. Old tech, no digital signature, impossible to trace. Inside was a map. A new map. It didn't show human space. It showed where human space used to be, all blank. But something was growing in its place, expanding. Dark zones, blind signals, Unreachable sectors, systems that once sent beacons now fell silent. The red ring wasn't a line anymore, it was a crack, and the crack was spreading. Varnek stared at the map for a long time. Then he said quietly, "It's not just protecting itself anymore." "No," she agreed. "We think it's awakening." That word sat in the room like a bomb. "Why now?" he asked. "It's been centuries. They stayed away. Why change?" The woman hesitated. Then she pulled out a second cube. This one was black, illegal, encrypted in radiation-blocked tech. She handed it over. This was stolen from a deep project buried under the Galactic High Council. They were experimenting with recovered human code. From an ancient satellite fragment, one of their earliest defense drones. They cracked part of it open. Varnex looked at her. "They what?" She nodded. "They poked the nest. And now the nest is stirring." "Exactly." He sat down, suddenly exhausted. His heart felt like it had aged a decade in a moment. "So what now?" he asked. "Warn the galaxy? Start screaming across the stars?" "No," she said. "That would make it worse. Panic spreads. Curiosity follows. You saw what it did to your ship." He nodded. Then a thought crept in. "If it's awakening, is it coming back?" The woman's expression shifted, darkened. She didn't answer. She didn't have to, because in his bones Varnex already knew. The humans didn't vanish to protect the galaxy forever. They vanished to buy time. Time for the universe to mature, to learn, to leave them alone. But it didn't, and now something was returning. Not out of vengeance, not out of anger, out of necessity, because humanity didn't forget how to destroy. They forgot how to stop. Varnex didn't remember falling asleep. But when he woke, the map cube was gone. So was the woman. No name, no trace. Only the faint scent of ozone left behind, an old trick humans used, part of their stealth coding. He sat in his bunk, staring at the wall, blankly chewing synthetic protein that tasted like regret. The light was dim, flickering from power surges that had started a week ago across the station. No one had answers, not the engineers, not the station AI. But he knew. The systems weren't broken. They were being watched. The universe was shifting. Slowly, quietly, but undeniably. The red ring had been a warning. Now it was a perimeter. A wound on the galaxy's map that refused to heal. One by one, nearby star systems began to experience anomalies. Blackouts, time drifts, entire planets losing contact with orbiting satellites. It was spreading, not like an invasion, more like an infection. And the worst part? No one outside believed it. Politicians were dismissing the human anomaly as deep space radiation decay. Science guilds debated whether the missing systems had simply fallen into gravitational collapse. But Varnex had seen it. He had heard it. And now it was whispering again. 3 days later, the mining rig above Joros III stopped responding. A week after that, a trade caravan from the Kresh Syndicate lost all navigation within 30 light-years of the Red Ring. When they emerged, every AI on board had been wiped clean. No logs, no memory. Just a blank, glassy black screen, and a message burned into the mainframe. Repetition is disobedience. The council took notice, not publicly, but in the way cowards always do, by gathering secretly away from their marble chambers and political theater. Rumors of quiet summits spread like solar flares. Ships started avoiding certain systems. Mercenaries and scavengers were vanishing by the dozens. Even pirates stopped loitering near human space. But one group didn't stop. The Farsight Division. They were the Council's deepest black ops unit. Scientists and soldiers too reckless for public eyes. And they had a plan. Varnex heard about it through the underground channels. He almost laughed when he read it. They were going to send a probe into Earth's old orbit. A single drone. To map gravitational distortions, they claimed. But Varnex knew better. They were poking the nest again, and this time the nest wasn't asleep. He needed answers. Real ones. No more maps. No more dreams. If something was awakening inside that forbidden zone, if humanity, or whatever it had become, was returning, he had to understand what they were now, because he didn't believe they were flesh and bone anymore. He remembered that figure in the relay. Black armor, no face, gravity bending around it like a cloak. That wasn't a man, that was memory, weaponized. He knew one place that might have answers. He swore he'd never go back, but desperation is a funny thing. He booked passage to Deadspin, a junk world turned black market archive, known for salvaging forgotten tech and forbidden relics. It floated in a decaying orbit near the outer rim of the Jaith cluster. Lawless, dangerous, perfect. He arrived under a false ID, wrapped in a heat-dampening cloak. The air was thick with chemical smog, the sky purple with debris storms. He made his way to the underground vaults, a place run by a thing named Krell, part biological, mostly metal. Krell remembered him. "Captain Varnex," it rasped, voice like knives on rust. "You're supposed to be dead. Again." "I need something," Varnex said, ignoring the jab. Krell clicked its mechanical jaw. "Does it involve the place no one dares name?" Varnex didn't speak. Krell nodded anyway. "I thought so." They walked past databanks older than the Council itself, through halls lit by decaying star cores and protected by radiation shields that buzzed against his skin. Finally, Krell stopped in front of a sealed vault, one of the oldest, marked with the human-era glyph for exile. No one knew how Krell got his hands on it. No one asked. "You open it, you take the consequences," Krell warned. "There are echoes inside." "I've lived with them already," Varnex said. The vault hissed open. Inside was a terminal, pre-galactic standard, running on human-era code. The interface was jagged, glitching, alive. It pulsed when Varnex approached. "Name?" it asked in a mechanical female voice, old Earth American accent. "Varnex." "Access level?" He paused, then said what he hoped was true. "Witness." The terminal went still. Then, "Recognized. Last contact. Relay 9C. Memory stream enabled." The screen flashed, and then the past poured out. Videos, logs, tactical data, but not just information, emotion. He felt it through his skin, through his teeth. The final war. The war that ended contact between humanity and the rest of the galaxy. Not because they were defeated, but because they were winning too well. Varnex saw footage of entire civilizations begging for surrender, before shots were fired, not out of fear of human weapons, but out of fear of their minds, their ability to adapt, to outthink, to reprogram anything, even species biology. Humans had stopped fighting with fleets. They fought with reality. Then came the protocol. Code, Regression Protocol 9, a universal memory purge. Humanity built it to erase itself from all known galactic knowledge. They didn't want to be remembered. Not as gods, not as monsters, not as anything. So they vanished. And anyone who tried to enter their space was judged. Not killed, not always, sometimes just marked. Varnex staggered back from the screen, his hands shaking. Whatever was stirring in human space wasn't just an AI. It was collective consciousness. A memory so vast, so advanced, it developed its own morality. And now, something had crossed a line. The drone. The probe. Farsight had sent it into the forbidden zone. And Varnex knew they'd answered. He was on the way back to the port when the stars changed. Literally. The sky blinked. Dozens of systems along the edge of the red ring vanished from the star map. Not exploded, not attacked, removed, like they'd never been there. He pulled up a real-time nav feed. Empty. Void. And then came the final message, pulsing through every unauthorized channel, using dead languages and ancient symbols. But the meaning was clear. You crossed again. We warned you. This time, you will remember us. On 1,000 worlds. The same dream spread that night, of a black figure with no face walking through time, of an eye in the sky opening above their cities, of memories that didn't belong to them, of a name whispered through their blood. Humanity. It wasn't revenge, it wasn't conquest, it was awakening. And the galaxy wasn't ready. By the time the galaxy started to believe, it was already too late. The Farsight Division's drone never returned, not physically at least. But 7 days after it entered the perimeter of Sol system, something came back. A pulse. Not through space, not through subspace. It moved through thought. Billions of sentient beings across thousands of worlds woke up screaming in perfect unison, each of them having dreamt the same impossible image. A planet, blue and green, cradled in gold light, burning in slow motion, not from weapons, but from memory. Earth. But not the Earth historians had guessed at, not the mythologized Terran cradle the universe liked to decorate with fear and wonder. This Earth was alive, pulsing with data, orbiting black cubes and shifting moons. The Earth in those dreams wasn't dead. It was awake. Varnex was in hiding again, this time deep in the oceanic bunkers beneath the Lox Tier Trench on Halvera 7. An outlaw data priest had offered him sanctuary after he released fragments of the recovered vault files across secret networks. The priest's name was Brawlin, once a renowned xenohistorian, now marked heretic. You shouldn't have shared those files, Brawlin rasped, his gills fluttering as he filtered air. You think they don't see that they didn't want you to share it? Varnex sat on the floor, staring at the walls, still replaying the last vision from the archive. If they wanted me dead, I'd be gone. Like Gel. Like my ship. Exactly, Brolin said. They don't delete without reason. They let you live. They let you remember. Why? Brolin didn't answer immediately. He walked to a console, old, cracked, half-corroded, and pulled up a star map. Where Sol System should have been was just a black void. No name, no coordinates. He tapped on it anyway. The screen glitched. File locked. Memory hazard class 9. Do you wish to proceed? Brawlin hesitated, then entered his override. The map bled red, not figuratively. Pixels leaked into each other, and a sound like whispering wind echoed through the bunker. Do you hear that? Varnex asked. Brawlin nodded solemnly. That's not audio. Then what is it? It's echoes. The humans didn't build machines. They built reminders. Their technology doesn't just store data, it stores intention. Varnex's breath caught. What if, Brawlin continued, they didn't exile themselves to hide, but to teach? What if they're trying to prepare us? For what? For what they're becoming. Across the galaxy, strange behavior spread like wildfire. On a mining colony near the Athex Rift, a group of children began speaking in perfect Old Terran Latin, an extinct Earth language never taught or decoded. On Keplerian, a nomadic trader ship received a signal containing Earth music files from the 21st century, embedded inside dark matter bursts. A rogue AI designed for planetary farming shut itself down, only to reactivate and begin carving the word remember across 400 acres of terrain, over and over, in Earth-standard block letters. On every planet, everywhere, the same word began bleeding into consciousness. Remember. People who had never seen Earth dreamed of it nightly. Languages long dead flowed from mouths. A child on Varus Prime drew Earth's map in ash. A prisoner on Bolthera chanted old NASA launch codes in their sleep. A sentient fungus on Driftworld 12 began reshaping its spores to match Terran DNA sequences. Whatever humanity had become, it was reaching out. Not physically, mentally. At first, the Galactic Council tried to contain it. They censored the word human from the networks. They shut down entire subnetworks. Some even proposed a galactic quarantine. But it was useless. You can't quarantine thought. You can't suppress a dream. By the end of the next cycle, 22 more systems reported mass memory infections. People were waking up with skills they'd never learned. A pilot who had never flown before commandeered an ancient Terran-style fighter in a trance and navigated a meteor field blind. A priest began reciting technical schematics for a Terran quantum field engine, classified and buried for centuries. It wasn't just memory spreading anymore. It was ability. Human memory was leaking into the collective unconscious. And wherever it touched, it didn't fade. It grew. Varnex couldn't sleep anymore. He didn't try. Every time his eyes closed, he saw them, not humans, not anymore. Beings of light and steel, their forms vague but constant, like shadows sculpted by thunder. They walked through time. Their hands didn't touch. They influenced. He saw civilizations bowing before them, not out of fear, but out of awe. And then he saw what came after. A black wave, not evil, not a weapon, but a reset. The humans hadn't just disappeared to spare the galaxy. They had wiped themselves from history as a test, to see if the rest of existence could evolve without them. And now, the test was over. They were returning, not as conquerors, but as corrections. He and Brolin stood over the deep-sea archive, watching the pulse. It wasn't light, it was presence, moving slowly but undeniably from the center of the void outward, a ripple across existence itself. "You see it now," Brolin said quietly. "They're not coming," Varnex whispered. "They've already arrived. In us." Brolin nodded. "They're not just a species anymore. They're a principle." Within the next lunar cycle, Earth reappeared on star maps. No warning, no announcement. It just came back. Data that had been missing for centuries flooded the networks. Gravitational markers. Light echoes, time signatures, as if someone had turned the universe's memory back on. Council probes were launched immediately. None came back, except one. Its footage showed a singular frame, a city, vast, clean, alive, empty of people. But the buildings moved when looked at. They adjusted to gaze, to thought. The probe was destroyed seconds later, but the message had been delivered. Earth was awake, and it was watching. Not long after, every major council species received a single transmission. It arrived on every known frequency, across language, biology, time delay. One sentence, carved into the void. "We are not angry, we are not gods, but we are human, and we remember now." Then silence. But it wasn't quiet. It was expectant, like the eye of a storm just before it breathes. Back in the trench bunker, Brolin asked the only question left. "What do we do now?" Varnex looked up. He was different now. Not in the face, in the eyes. There was light there now. Faint, familiar. "We remember," he said simply, and for the first time in his life. He smiled. Not out of joy, but out of understanding. Because it wasn't humanity that was returning. It was what they had left behind. The echo of potential. The unfinished sentence. And the galaxy had just been reminded. The last word still belongs to Earth. The stars above Halvarus 7th no longer twinkled. They pulsed. Rhythmic, deliberate, like a giant heart beating across the void. One by one, constellations that had never changed in millennia began to flicker and shift, subtly, Impossibly, forming shapes that were never there before. Symbols, messages. A silent skywriting no known species could decipher, except one. And they weren't talking, because they no longer needed to. 3 weeks after Earth reappeared on star charts, the phenomenon spread. Stations across the galaxy, both active and long abandoned, began to reactivate. Ruins blinked back to life. Dead satellites powered themselves without visible energy sources. A beacon from the Orion grave belt, a battlefield graveyard dormant for over 300 years, lit up with an ancient signal. It wasn't in a language, it was in emotion, fear, hope, longing, memory. Experts tried to break it down. They couldn't. You can't decrypt feeling. You can only experience it. Entire populations found themselves lost in waking trances, sitting in silence for hours after exposure to one of the beacons, emerging with tears, sometimes laughter, sometimes horror. The memories weren't theirs, but they were inside them anyway. Human memories. Billions of them. Across time, across pain, across a species that had once scorched its own planet clean, and still found the strength to rise again. Not to dominate, but to become something else entirely. Something the galaxy had never seen before. Something it might never see again. A species that chose to stop existing rather than rule. And now, it was returning. Not to finish what it started, but to restart what it ended. On the council world of Vedral, Chancellor Ress of the Valari stood before the Galactic Assembly, trembling. The room, an enormous rotunda of marble and memory glass, was silent as she spoke. "This is no longer a matter of containment," she said, her voice hollow. "We are not dealing with a rogue AI. We are not dealing with a militarized threat. What we are facing is conceptual." Murmurs echoed. "What do you mean conceptual?" barked an Azari war priest. Ress held up a memory node. "This contains the last 3 hours of my dreams. Not mine, actually. Someone else's. A mother from Earth. Her name was Kaylee. She had 2 children. She watched one die in a dust storm during a time called the Collapse. I felt it. Every breath. Every scream." The murmurs died. "I do not have a name for what is happening," she whispered. "But I know this. We are not separate anymore. Whatever humanity became, they have mastered something deeper than force. They have become influence." "You think this is infection?" someone asked. Ress shook her head. "No. This is contact." And no one dared argue. Back on Halvarus 7th, Varnex found himself drawn toward the sea. He didn't know why. The water was rough, pulled by gravitational tides no chart could explain. Brolin followed him, walking silently, their steps synced like sleepwalkers. At the edge of the ocean, the wind whispered in a voice not carried by air. "You see now." It wasn't a question. It wasn't even words, just understanding. The sea parted. Not violently, not dramatically, just gently enough to expose something beneath the surface. A structure, black metal, shaped like a ring, partially buried, humming with memory. It wasn't built by humans. It was human. They approached it, breath frozen in awe. Varnex reached out, placed a hand on the surface. He didn't touch metal. He touched home. And it opened. Not with light. With feeling. Varnex stumbled as sensations poured into him, images of Earth's final days before vanishing, the last council appeal, the silence afterward, and then the moment they decided, to leave, to fade, to wait, the structure pulsed. Now we return, not to command, not to conquer, but to remind. "What are you reminding us of?" Varnex whispered, knees buckling. "Of what you are capable of becoming, or destroying." He understood. It was never about humans. It was about what humans proved could be done. They took the highest seat in the galaxy once, and gave it up. Not because they were noble, but because they were scared. Scared of what came next. Scared of what came after winning. So they buried themselves. In memory, in code, in us. News spread faster than light, but slower than belief. Earth was no longer dangerous. It was sacred. A monument to restraint, a mirror. Ships still didn't land, but they orbited, watched, prayed. And then something changed again. On the 44th day after the first dream, a single signal was broadcast from Earth, using no known technology. The stars went quiet. Every world froze. Every screen across the galaxy lit with the same phrase, "You are ready to remember," followed by coordinates. One set, one location, the moon, not Earth, the moon. The first step, the first fall, the first return. Varnex was there. Of course he was. They invited him without invitation. He arrived on a stolen diplomatic cruiser, flanked by others like him, survivors of the relay incident. The Woken, they were called now, those touched by the memory, all species, all backgrounds. They landed in silence. The moon looked ordinary. Dust, rock, stillness. But beneath the surface there was light, and beneath the light, a library. Not books, not data, memories, perfectly preserved. Billions, projected into mind, not screen. Every life ever lived on Earth. Every decision, every mistake, every lesson. Varnex walked through a hall of mirrors, not reflecting his body but his thoughts, his choices, his regrets. He wept. So did the others. Because the greatest weapon the humans had ever created wasn't a weapon. It was perspective, and they had given it freely, to everyone. Across the galaxy, war paused. Old enemies stopped firing. Silence became sacred, because now every species had access to the same thing, a complete history of human failure and triumph. And it changed them, not instantly, but deeply. Because once you saw Earth, truly saw it, you never looked at your own world the same again. That night, Varnex stood at the edge of the moon's memory field, staring at the blue orb above. The Earth pulsed slowly, not calling, not summoning, just being. And in its stillness, it said the most powerful thing imaginable. We are not coming back, but we never really left. And Varnex finally understood. Human space was never off limits. It was just offered to those who could remember what it meant to be small and still dream big. The moon was no longer quiet. It didn't speak in sound, didn't shine any brighter or spin any faster. But to those who stood upon its surface or hovered in orbit nearby, it felt alive. And not alive like an ecosystem or a hive. Alive in the way an idea is alive, in the way a memory shapes the present. For the first time in recorded galactic history, ships from every major species circled a single planetary body without weapons primed, without shields raised. There was no threat, no war, no competition, only reverence. What had once been the forgotten twin of Earth, a satellite left behind, had become the galaxy's first temple. A site not of worship, but of humility. The Human Memory Archive, they called it now. But it wasn't just human anymore. It had begun to accept others. Varnex sat alone in a shallow crater near the equator, helmet off, visor clear. The artificial atmosphere that now surrounded the moon's archive zone wasn't built. It wasn't constructed or terraformed in any traditional sense. It was offered, like everything else. He watched as a young Shaltari girl walked with her father down a mirrored corridor nearby. She couldn't have been more than 6 Earth years in age, though her kind measured time in song, not numbers. Her hand brushed a light pillar, and for a moment she froze. Then she smiled and started laughing, pointing at the air. When Varnex focused, he saw it too, a shimmering image of a Terran boy, clumsy and muddy, chasing a dog through a rainstorm. The memory floated like mist, harmless and bright. "She's seeing his life?" a voice asked behind him. He turned. It was the Chancellor of Vedral herself, Res, dressed not in council robes, but in plain robes of dusty blue. "No," Varnex said. "She's feeling it." "And what's the difference?" He looked back towards the child. "She's not just watching what the boy did. She understands why, what he lost, what he loved. She carries it now, not as knowledge, as empathy." Res nodded solemnly. "That's what terrifies the old powers the most," she said. "Not the technology, not the history, but the possibility that once every being has walked through a human's pain, they'll stop needing the council altogether." "Good," Varnex muttered. Res chuckled. "That's why I came here. I'm dissolving the assembly." He turned sharply. "What?" "Unanimous vote. Even the military blocs agreed. There's no point trying to control a galaxy where every mind is slowly remembering what it means to suffer like someone else." Varnex exhaled, stunned. "So that's it?" "Not the end," she said softly. "The start. Finally." Within months, the effects rippled outward. Galactic currency lost relevance. People started trading memories instead, bartering experiences for education, healing, connection. Entire planetary governments abdicated, not in rebellion, but in clarity. Dictators stepped down voluntarily. Several ancient warlords of the Korshal Empire held a funeral for their own ideology and then offered their war fleets to the nearest terraforming projects. Religion didn't end, but it evolved. Gods once carved from starlight and plasma were now humble reflections of grief and resilience. Prayers changed, temples changed, and on each new world, whether ice rock or gas giant, a single phrase became the standard greeting: "I remember with you." But not everything was harmony. Not yet. There were those who resisted. The Preservers of Silence, a secretive order formed from council leftovers and ultra-nationalist splinters, believed the archive was a weapon, that the memories were a virus, that humanity had found a new way to conquer, by infecting minds instead of systems. They weren't entirely wrong, because the memories were spreading, not through code, not through signal, through presence, and some people couldn't handle what they saw. One member of the Preservers, a former Rakari general, entered the archive determined to find proof of manipulation. He lasted less than 10 minutes. He came out sobbing, blind, begging for forgiveness, for crimes he hadn't yet committed. Another, a traitor turned arms dealer, entered cocky and armored in cynicism. He never came out. His body was found kneeling beside a projection of the Hiroshima ruins. He had left behind a message scratched into the dust. "They chose not to become gods, and I can't even choose to be decent." Brolin died quietly 6 weeks later. Varnex sat with him as his bio-lungs failed. The old data priest had seen too much and carried too much. But he died smiling. "You think they're still human?" he asked Varnex as the end came. "I think," Varnex said, holding his hand, "they became what humans would have been if they'd learned just a little sooner." "Then maybe the rest of us can catch up," Brolin whispered. And then he was gone. The archive began to change again. It was subtle at first. The memories no longer centered on Earth. Now there were others. The dreams of alien children, the heartbreak of non-human parents, the mistakes, the triumphs, the tiny details of lives lived far beyond Sul. The archive was absorbing more. It had become a library not just of humanity, but of everyone. Varnex understood then, this wasn't humanity's final legacy. It was their invitation, and now the galaxy was writing back. In time, the moon itself changed. The structure beneath the surface grew, not in size, but in depth, layers unfolding like petals, welcoming more species, more memories, more pain, more beauty. No guards, no gates. Only one rule remained, etched into the entry. To enter is to feel. To feel is to remember. To remember is to change. And what of Earth? It remained silent, watching, pulsing softly in orbit like an elder who no longer needed to speak, because their children had finally learned to listen. And so, humanity did not return in ships. They did not return with banners or fleets or flags. They returned through us, through our grief, our wonder, our shared memory, because the cosmos still remembered them not as monsters or as saviors, but as the first to regret power, and the first to offer that regret as a gift. Varnex lived to be 112. He never returned to the stars. He stayed on the moon, became a quiet guardian of the archive, a nameless figure visitors would sometimes see walking along the horizon. He never published a report, never recorded a log. Only once, near the end, did he send a message back to the stars, a brief, unencrypted whisper across open channels. They gave us memory, we gave them meaning, and in the end, remembering was enough. Final line of the story. Human space was never off.